So imagine spending, I don't know, 6 months working nights and weekends. You're pouring your life savings into building this magnificent, beautifully engineered bridge.
Right.
You finish the last rivet, you step back to admire your work, and you realize, ah, you built it over a completely dry riverbed. Like, nobody ever wants to cross it. You basically built a bridge to nowhere.
Oh, it's a devastating realization. And honestly, the worst part is just how common it is. I mean, in the world of product development, we see massive amounts of capital and human potential really poured into dry riverbeds every single day.
Yeah, the statistics in the stack of sources we're diving into today are just staggering. Like, 42% of startups fail for one simple reason, which is that they build something nobody actually wants.
Yeah.
And, this isn't just a startup problem either. Even for established, well-funded companies, an astonishing 94% of shipped software features deliver almost zero value to customers.
94%.
Which means the vast majority of our time is spent optimizing the wrong things. Exactly. So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today, and what we're bringing you from these sources, is the ultimate shortcut to bulletproof product validation. We're looking at a mix of product validation frameworks, like Alberto Savoya's prototyping, some deep psychological breakdowns of user research biases, and a live, behind-the-scenes look at an AI startup called Squad Match.
It's a great stack of material. And the overarching philosophy tying all this research together is that early market learning is infinitely more valuable than development speed.
Right, because if you're building the wrong thing, speed just helps you fail faster.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this. The failure rate is astronomical, but the sources point out that this doesn't start with bad coding, right? It starts right inside our own brains, at the very beginning of the validation process.
It really does.
Because when you have a new idea, the immediate instinct is to run out and ask people if they like it. But asking users if they want your product is, well, it's a lot like asking people if they plan to go to the gym on January 1st.
Oh, totally. Everyone says yes.
Right. Because they like the idea of being that kind of person.
Yeah.
But if you build a business model on those answers, you're pouring a foundation of polite lies.
Yeah, the cognitive bias research we're looking at today, alongside these operational architecture blueprints, it breaks down the psychology of why those polite lies happen. It's fascinating.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, when you ask a potential customer a hypothetical question like, would you use this app? You immediately trigger social desirability bias.
Okay.
As humans, we are innately predisposed to avoid social friction. We want to be agreeable. The person you are talking to doesn't want to look you in the eye and call your baby ugly, basically. So they tell you what they assume you want to hear.
Which is funny, right? It's not malicious. They aren't actively trying to sabotage your company. It's just a default human defense mechanism.
Exactly. But on the flip side of that equation, you have the founders and product managers themselves who are heavily influenced by false consensus bias.
Ah, right.
This is the ingrained belief that your own personal frustrations and preferences are, far more common than they actually are.
Yes, there was that great case study in the research about the travel service team mapping out their quarterly updates.
Oh, the legroom one.
Yes. So one highly influential stakeholder on the team insisted that legroom was the absolute biggest frustration for their travelers.
Simply because that specific stakeholder traveled all the time and personally hated being cramped in a seat, they just assumed their own pain point was the universal pain point.
But the data said something else, right?
Yeah, their own user feedback data actually pointed to luggage space as the primary pain point for the broader customer base.
Oh, wow.
But because of false consensus bias, the stakeholders' personal grievance won out. The team prioritized legroom, launched the update, and saw absolutely zero change in user satisfaction.
That is brutal.
They spent a whole quarter building a feature for themselves, not for the market.
See, I struggled with this next concept at first. Because I hear constantly that talking to users is the golden rule of startups, the whole, get out of the building mantra.
Right.
So if people are predisposed to lie to us, and we are predisposed to project our own biases onto them, how do we actually gather reliable data? Are you saying we just shouldn't talk to them at all?
No, you still have to talk to users, but you have to completely change the structure of the conversation to neutralize those biases. The sources introduced this framework widely known as the mom test.
I love that name.
It's perfect, right? The core premise is that you should never ask a question that even your own mother could lie to you about. You bypass the hypothetical polite lies by asking strictly about past behavior and actual historical spending.
Let's put that into practice for the listener. So if I'm building a new meal prep application, My instinct is to say, would you pay $10 a month for an app that plans your dinners?
And that is a guaranteed way to get a polite lie. Everyone wants to eat healthier and be organized. A mom test approach would be asking, walk me through exactly what you ate for dinner over the last 5 days.
Oh, that's completely different.
Right, because if they tell you they ordered takeout 4 times and ate a bowl of cereal on the 5th night, their actual behavior proves they are not your target market.
Even if they enthusiastically claim they would totally use your app.
Exactly. You look for manual workarounds and historical spending. If they aren't currently spending time or money trying to solve the problem, the pain just isn't acute enough to support a business.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because if hypothetical questions are basically just polite noise, that leaves us in a weird spot. We have to measure what people actually do.
Yes.
But how do we test actual user behavior without spending 6 months and a massive budget writing code for a product that doesn't even exist yet?
Well, the answer to that lies in Alberto Savoya's framework of prototyping, and that's prototyping with an E. A prototype is fundamentally different from a prototype. A prototype tests if you can build it. A prototype tests if you should build it. It simulates the core experience of the product to capture behavioral engagement before you invest in engineering.
The examples in the sources for this are just brilliant, like the Pinocchio method.
Oh, the Palm Pilot one.
Yes. When Jeff Hawkins was inventing the Palm Pilot, he didn't start by engineering a tiny motherboard and a miniature screen. He went into his garage, cut a block of wood to the exact dimensions he envisioned for the device, and just carried it in his shirt pocket for weeks.
Just a block of wood.
Just wood.
Huh.
He used a little chopstick as a stylus.
Yeah.
And he would physically pull the wood out of his pocket to tap on it whenever someone asked for a meeting or a phone number.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd to walk around tapping on a block of wood.
Yeah.
But think about the behavioral data he was gathering, right?
Yeah.
He needed to know if the form factor was right, and more importantly, if the habit of carrying a digital calendar would actually stick.
Yeah.
He validated the physical interaction model without taking on a single ounce of technical risk.
And then there's another amazing historical example. IBM's use of the mechanical Turk method decades ago.
Oh, this is a classic.
They wanted to build a speech-to-text computer. But developing voice recognition software from scratch back then would have required years of research and millions of dollars. So instead, they put users in a room with a microphone and a monitor, but no keyboard.
Right.
They told the users to just speak into the microphone, and magically, text appeared on the screen in real time.
And the users fully believed the machine was translating their speech. But in reality, IBM had a highly skilled, lightning-fast typist hidden in the next room, listening through the microphone and typing everything out manually.
It's so clever. And what I love about this is what the experiment uncovered. Because in a survey, 100% of people would probably say a computer that types what you speak sounds amazing. But when IBM ran this mechanical Turk, the actual behavioral data revealed massive roadblocks. Users quickly realized that talking out loud all day gave them severe sore throats.
Wow, yeah.
Right. And the office environment became incredibly noisy. Plus, dictating confidential financial or HR documents out loud created these massive privacy issues.
Oh, of course it did.
IBM saved years of wasted engineering by discovering those behavioral friction points early.
Yeah, and every single one of these prototypes, including the infiltrator method mentioned in the sources.
Oh, the dog beer.
Yeah, where a founder wrapped regular dog food cans in fake beer for dogs labels and just snuck them onto pet store shelves to see if anyone would try to buy them.
So funny.
Right, but all of these are executing a broader strategy called the riskiest assumption test, or RAT.
So how is that different from an MVP? Because in standard product development, everyone talks about the MVP, the minimum viable product.
Right. But the sources argue that an MVP still fundamentally assumes the product should exist in the first place. The RAT framework forces you to use first principles thinking. You look at your business model and ask, how will this fail?
All right.
You're looking for the load-bearing assumption that, if proven wrong, destroys the entire concept. The formula provided in the research is simple. The cost of risk equals the probability of failure multiplied by the impact of that failure. You isolate the assumption with the highest impact and uncertainty, and you design a prototype to test that specific variable.
So how do we apply this? Like, what happens when you test the riskiest assumption and it actually fails?
Well, the JetStyle VR case study is a perfect illustration of this. So JetStyle was developing virtual reality rides for physical tourist attractions, right?
Okay.
Their entire business model rested on one massive assumption. that placing a VR ride in a mall or a museum would act as a magnet to generate new customer foot traffic for that location.
Got it. And if that assumption holds, locations will pay a premium for the installation.
Exactly. But JetStyle ran a riskiest assumption test before building out all the expensive, scalable hardware infrastructure. And the data from their RAT proved their core assumption completely false.
Wait, really? Completely false.
Completely. The VR rides didn't draw a single new person to the locations. They only entertained the existing foot traffic that was already walking by.
Which completely breaks the value proposition. They thought they were a lead generator, but the data proved they were just an incremental entertainment add-on.
Yeah.
If they had waited to learn that after launching the MVP, they likely would have gone bankrupt. Finding it out during the RF phase forced them into a strategic pivot that literally saved the company.
So you've isolated your riskiest assumption. You have a concept for a prototype to test it. The next hurdle, and honestly it's one of the most expensive traps in product development, is getting your internal team aligned to actually build the test. The sources refer to this as the alignment gap.
The way I conceptualize the alignment gap is by thinking about traditional product requirements documents, those massive text-heavy PRDs.
Oh, yes.
Relying on a written PRD is like having 5 people read the exact same fantasy novel. They all read the same words, but they all imagine the main character looking entirely different.
That is a great analogy.
Right. The product manager reads the requirements and pictures one interface. The designer pictures another. The back-end engineer imagines a totally different data architecture. They all nod in the kickoff meeting. But 3 weeks into the sprint, they realize they are building completely different products in their heads.
And visual prototyping is the antidote to that. A visual prototype is like watching the movie adaptation together. Everyone in the room is looking at the exact same screen, interacting with the exact same constraints.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Miro source we reviewed places heavy emphasis on this because the modern speed of software development is it's a double-edged sword. With AI coding assistants, teams can ship code faster than ever before. But shipping fast is incredibly dangerous if the team is misaligned. You're just compounding waste at a higher velocity.
Yeah, there was that painful anecdote in the research about a designer who spent 3 weeks crafting a pixel-perfect, highly complex user interface.
No, this one hurts to read.
Right. They finally showed it to the back-end engineering team, and the lead engineer took one look at it and pointed out that their current database architecture couldn't possibly load that many concurrent data streams on a single screen. Like, it would time out and crash.
3 weeks of design work instantly rendered useless. By utilizing rapid, clickable prototypes in a shared workspace from day one, you pull those alignment conversations forward. You surface architectural constraints when changes cost pennies rather than weeks of payroll.
Lufthansa's Miles & More program is a great real-world example of closing this gap. They operate in a legacy industry with notoriously long development cycles.
Really long.
Their traditional alignment process involved weeks of ping-ponging text documents back and forth between departments. But they completely overhauled that by moving to visual prototypes. They imported screenshots of their existing application into a collaborative whiteboard and used AI tools to generate editable, clickable mock-ups during a single workshop.
Yeah, they compressed a weeks-long documentation cycle into a 2-hour visual alignment session.
Wow.
And crucially, when they put those prototypes in front of users, they didn't ask those hypothetical mom test-failing questions like, do you like this new layout? They gave the users task-based goals.
Like what?
Like, can you use this interface to book a flight using your points? They shifted the feedback loop from subjective opinions to objective behavioral friction.
Okay, let's follow the life cycle through here. We've bypassed the cognitive biases, we've run the RAT, bridged the alignment gap with visual prototypes, and successfully deployed the MVP to early adopters. How do we objectively measure if the product is actually working? Like, how do you define product market fit?
The gold standard metric presented in the sources is the Sean Ellis test. You survey your active user base and ask them one highly specific question. How would you feel if you could no longer use this product?
Okay.
The options are very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. The benchmark is that if 40% or more of your users say they would be very disappointed, you have achieved early product market fit.
Why focus on the negative emotion of disappointment, though? Why not just send out a standard survey asking if they're satisfied with the app?
Because satisfaction is a remarkably weak business metric.
Really?
Yeah, a user can be perfectly satisfied with your software today, but the second a competitor launches a slightly cheaper or slightly prettier alternative, that satisfied user will abandon you without a second thought.
That's a good point.
The Sean Ellis test measures dependency. If a user is very disappointed that they can't use your product, it indicates that your solution has integrated so deeply into their daily workflow that they cannot easily replace you.
But hold on, I want to push back on this a little bit. Because the Reddit thread in our sources features several founders who are highly skeptical of relying on a single survey.
Yeah, I saw that.
Their argument is that a survey is just a snapshot in time. Couldn't users lie or misinterpret this too? Several founders pointed out that early product market fit is messy, and a 40% score doesn't mean anything if your onboarding flow is just terrible.
And it's a vital critique. If a user is confused by a terrible user interface, they will answer not disappointed if you take the app away simply because they never figured out how to use it in the first place.
Right.
This is why the operational architecture source insists that the Sean Ellis survey cannot exist in a vacuum. It must be utilized within a multi-signal scorecard.
Yeah.
You pair the survey with hard behavioral data.
So what are the specific behavioral signals we should be looking for alongside that survey?
You have to look at retention curves. Like, are people actually logging back in on week 2 and week 3? You look at organic growth and referral rates. The skeptical founders on Reddit nailed one fundamental truth. You have product market fit when the users start pulling you forward rather than you pushing the product onto them.
Oh, you mean when they start blowing up your support inbox because you moved a button they rely on?
Yes.
Or they're constantly demanding to know when the next feature integration is dropping. That friction is a sign of deep dependency.
Precisely. And to mitigate that onboarding issue, you have to be disciplined about your survey timing. You should only administer the Sean Ellis test to users who have actually experienced the core value of the product. So typically users who have been active for at least 2 weeks.
Because surveying someone on day 2 just ruins your data.
Exactly.
Okay, we've been talking about these frameworks conceptually, but the true test is when a company is, days away from launch and real money is on the line. The Squad Match internal validation document gives us a live look at this exact process in motion.
Oh, Squad Match is a fascinating synthesis of everything we've covered today.
Yeah.
So they are a B2B platform built for boutique dev shops and fractional CTOs.
Right, and the core of their product is this highly sophisticated 4-agent AI pipeline designed to generate hyper-personalized LinkedIn outreach.
Yeah.
And the pipeline is broken down into specialized agents. Agent research scrapes and analyzes the target company in about 800 milliseconds. Agent match semantically links the target's pain points to the dev squad's verified portfolio in 1200 milliseconds. Agent write drafts the message, and agent critic evaluates it.
This fast.
The entire pipeline executes in 5.7 seconds. For a boutique dev shop that normally spends hours manually researching leads, that speed is a massive scaling mechanism.
The latency is incredible, and the core technology clearly works. But when the team ran their ringiest assumption test right before their public beta launch, they uncovered major operational risks that had nothing to do with the AI.
Right. The validation document ultimately recommended a go for launch, but it came with 3 mandatory pivots that had to be executed immediately.
Yeah, and the first pivot is a textbook example of why we test the whole system, not just the tech.
What shocked me reading the document is how they actually found the error. They ran a RAT focused purely on user onboarding by simulating a live purchase transaction.
Yeah.
The AI pipeline worked perfectly, but the simulation revealed that their Wix CRM webhook was completely failing to apply the Squad Match beta user tag upon purchase.
And the blast radius of that mistag would have been catastrophic. If they had launched without running that transaction prototype, paying beta users would have been charged, received no onboarding access, and just churned immediately. They caught a back-end alignment failure just in time.
Wow. And the second mandatory pivot was purely strategic, right?
Right. The competitive analysis showed over 13 established competitors in the AI outreach space, massive players like HeyReach and Lemlist. If Squad Match went to market simply selling faster automation, they would be drowned out in a sea of volume spammers.
So they realized they had to change their entire market positioning.
Exactly. They couldn't just sell automation. They had to sell reasoning plus verification. Their actual moat is their Work Travel Academy ecosystem lock-in.
Yeah.
They tie the AI outreach directly to a dev squad's verified past proof of work. The volume players just can't replicate that trust layer.
And they took that differentiation a step further with the third pivot by identifying their critic agent as the true killer feature.
Yeah, this was smart.
Because in their four-step pipeline, the critic agent acts as this ruthless quality gate. It forces the writer agent to rewrite its own drafts on a loop until they score a 4.0 out of 5 for tone and specificity.
Right.
They realized they needed to prominently display the traces of this critic agent to clients, proving that this isn't just a generic ChatGPT wrapper pushing out spam.
It really is a masterclass in applying the frameworks we've discussed. I mean, they didn't just build in isolation and pray for a warm reception. They mapped the tech, identified the operational and strategic risks, ran targeted simulations, and pivoted their positioning based on hard evidence before exposing themselves to the broader market.
It all comes back to replacing assumptions with evidence. We started this deep dive by recognizing that human nature predisposes us to build on polite lies and false consensus.
Yeah.
We have to bypass those traps with a mom test. We learned how to use prototyping, from carrying blocks of wood to acting as mechanical Turks, to gather objective behavioral data before writing a single line of code.
Exactly.
We talked about closing the alignment gap with visual prototypes, measuring true dependency with the Sean Ellis test, and using operational RAT data to pivot before launch.
And whether you're launching a venture-backed tech startup, spinning up a weekend side hustle, or just pitching a new workflow to your department head, this framework ensures you're actually building a bridge people want to cross.
Yes.
But I do want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We have focused entirely on applying these frameworks to businesses and products today. But consider what happens if we apply prototyping to our personal lives.
Oh, I love the implications of that.
Right. Think about a massive life change you might be contemplating, like a total career pivot, going back to grad school, or moving to a new city across the country.
Yeah.
Instead of quitting your job, signing a lease, and committing 6 months in your life savings to a path you assume you will enjoy, how could you run a Pinocchio or a fake door test on that new life?
Wow.
How can you gather objective behavioral data on yourself before you take the leap? The principles of risk mitigation are exactly the same.
That is an incredible takeaway. Don't build a bridge to nowhere in your career or your personal life either. Make sure there is actually a road on the other side before you pour the concrete. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Go out there, test those risky assumptions, and we will catch you next time.